Chad Hufford owns and runs a financial planning firm based in Anchorage, Alaska, that manages roughly $500 million. During his 17 years in the business, he's realized that managing clients' mindsets, behaviors, and habits is really the most crucial part of the job. Chad comes from a strong background in athletics, nutrition, and performance psychology, bringing a coaching mindset and the heart of a teacher to financial planning and investing. He strives both to empower and educate his audience to not only become better investors, but to live more intentionally and create an abundant life. Welcome to the show, Chad. You are one of the unusual uh, people in the business combining these two elements of health and financial planning. Just take us on that journey you took, bringing both worlds together.
Well, Reino, first of all, I appreciate you having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. And I have a lot of background in the health and fitness industry. In fact, actually, I have a degree in biochemistry. And I was just on another show earlier. We were talking about that, and they were saying that's kind of an indirect path. You're running a financial planning firm with a biochemistry degree. But it's a fascination of mine. In fact, my plan was to go into medicine. God kind of took me on another path. But what I found is there's so many parallels to that. And in the sense that both health, financial health, and physical health, they're both long-term commitments. There's no pill for it. It takes hard work. It takes perseverance. It takes discipline and intentionality, but it also takes a long-term commitment. And if you don't stick with it, you can unravel all the progress you've made. So let's just take a professional athlete, for example. We can illustrate both sides of this with a professional athlete, somebody who is in incredible shape, the top of their literal game, and they're making tons of money. Then you fast forward 5 years after they retire. Unfortunately, and very tragically, a lot of those professional athletes are broke, and not just financially, but oftentimes physically. They've let their body go. The injuries that they took on during their career have built up. And if you look at them 10 years after, 5 years after, you couldn't even tell that this person was a professional athlete. And the problem is they didn't keep up with the activities that got them in that shape to begin with. And from a financial standpoint, they maybe never had those habits, those behaviors. And just like you can take wealth, you can hand it to somebody that doesn't know how to handle money, and pretty soon it's going to disappear. We see that with people inheriting a lot of money, or they win a lottery, or they sell a company, and they never learned how to use the tool, so it doesn't last. And what we're trying to do is build sustainable wealth. And really, it's bigger than that, Reino. It's building a life of abundance. And physical health is essential to that. You could be a billionaire, or at least a multimillionaire, but if you don't have good health, you're not going to experience a life of independence. You're not going to experience abundance. So we just think that both are incredibly important. And I use those parallels all the time, physical health, financial health, because there's so many metaphors that connect both ways.
Yeah, the Dalai Lama once said that what surprised him most about humanity was that man sacrifices his health in order to make money. Then he sacrifices money to recuperate his health. A
Yes.
lot of people I know spend their whole life earning money to then start living when they go into retirement. They enjoy it for 2-3 years, and then their health catches up with them. So absolutely agree with you. But what tips would you give people to, on the one hand, engage financially, build a financial foundation, and at the same time to keep a certain level of fitness?
Okay.
Like managers travel a lot, obviously. That is a stress factor. They face a lot of stress factors on the job, which obviously also impacts health.
Well, I would say both in health health and fitness and in finances, sometimes what you remove is more important than what you add. So a lot of times removing what doesn't need to be there is actually what propels people forward. We're especially here in America, we're really quick to want to add things, a new idea, a new supplement, a new software, a new tool, a new investment, new mutual fund, whatever it is. We want to add something. But a lot of times it's pulling out the stuff that we've added in our life already that's getting in our way. So from a dieting standpoint, it's cutting out the things we need to stop doing. It's cutting out the refined foods, the sugars, the heavily processed garbage. It might be cutting out watching shows late at night and staring at your phone, which not only wastes time, but also disrupts your sleep. And even if you're sleeping enough, you're not sleeping well. Your sleep quality is diminished when we spend the last 2-3 hours of our evening on electronic devices watching TV. So cutting out those things can propel people forward. On the financial side, cutting out expenditures that you don't need, turning off the news that brings stress to our psychological side. But also there's so much misinformation. People are so focused on the short term because the news is 24/7 news cycle of doom, gloom, and misinformation that it pulls us off our long-term goals. We're focused on the weather today, not what we're building in the future. Eliminating debt. A lot of people say they can't afford to save for retirement, but if you look at their spending, they start out the month paying everybody else first. They're paying the mortgage company, the car company, the credit card company, the bank, all these different things. By the time they get going on their month, there isn't much left maybe to save. So I think eliminating mistakes is a huge part of success in either realm. And especially in investing itself. A lot of people, if they would just leave their investments alone, they would grow. It's kind of like planting an orchard. Every time a storm's come through, you don't want to dig up your trees and try to bring them into the garage. And I can't remember who said, I think it was Warren Buffett said the most important thing with compounding is not to interrupt it unnecessarily. But people do that all the time with their investments. They get afraid of something on the news. They're afraid of inflation. They're afraid of whatever. And they pull their investments, even if it's temporarily. But those are the types of mistakes that people can avoid. And it's simple. It's not necessarily easy, but it isn't doing some newfangled thing. It's a lot of times just eliminating bad behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what in your terms would be a good retirement savings strategy? Because in most of our countries, we're having this huge problem with an ever-growing older population having to be supported by an ever smaller younger population. Big problem in China, big problem in Europe. I don't know what it's like in America, but the typical state pension scheme in Europe is obviously not going to work long term. But young people, a lot of young people I know aren't saving. So there's a big problem coming ahead.
There is, and we're right in the midst of it. We're seeing that already. So here in the United States, the average retiree, 65 years and older, is living off of Social Security, living off of government payments as their primary income source. And it's not a lot of money. So a lot of these folks are living, maybe not destitute, but essentially paycheck to paycheck. They're still stressed out about finances. A lot of these people are still carrying debt. And to your point, not only are people living longer, costs are rising. So people are living longer in a higher expense environment. You combine those two, that's a recipe for disaster. So while investors are often worried about losing their money, the real risk is often outliving it. People just are living longer. I listened to I think Mark Reiner that was on your show recently and talking about the sustainability of health and things like that. But unfortunately, some of the poor health decisions people make in their 40s and 50s catch up to them in their 80s, and they might live into their 80s, but their lifestyle is so hampered by previous bad health decisions that jacks up the cost even more, because as you said, they're trying to recoup their health in their 70s and 80s as they pay for poor decisions in their 40s and 50s. So people are living longer, but it's longer life. It's not necessarily more life in their years. And all those things are combining to a very expensive problem. And I think that the biggest thing I would say to people is just living with intentionality, living with an idea that you're trying to create a better future, which means you need a better relationship with your future self. And a lot of people view the future version of Chad, the future version of Reino, the future version of themselves, like a completely different person. Like they're making decisions almost as if that's the future version of them. It's their problem, not their own problem, somebody else's issue. And it will eventually catch up with them. So we always try to encourage people to begin with the end in mind. Think about what they want their life to look like. Where do they want to be? Who do they want to become? What is going to be meaningful and fulfilling for them as an individual? Not what's going to impress their neighbors or what does their family want for them, but what do they individually want? And then we reverse engineer it, because I can't tell you, Reino, what's important to you. I can help you figure out how to get there, but getting people to understand what's deeply important to them and setting up a plan around a blueprint, almost like you're building this financial house, but it's based around what is vitally important and meaningful to that individual. And then we reverse engineer it. So what happens then is we're looking at those long-term goals, but we're connecting them to what they're doing today, this week, and this month. And it brings the future into focus. It brings 20, 30-year goals into the present, so they can connect what I'm doing today with where I want to be in the future. No different than somebody who's maybe training for a marathon or training for a big event, reverse engineering that pathway so what they do today has a measurable, meaningful impact on whatever that physical event is in the future. We're just doing it from a financial side.
Yeah, and that's where these immediate gratifications become so unimportant if you have that long-term view in front of you. And such an important point, because I think in our consumerist society, there is so much of this immediate gratification addiction, where people fall into debt. They have huge credit card debts and are unable to save. Now, some people say you can only put something aside if you create your own business. That's one aspect of creating resources for the future. But what would you advise for people who are in a normal day-to-day job? Can they become more or less financially sustainable?
Yes, absolutely believe they can. In fact, most of the folks that we work with do not have super high paying jobs or own their own business or things like that. We call them blue collar millionaires. We have pipe fitters, welders, truck drivers, teachers, law enforcement. Now, a lot of these people have good jobs, but they're not crazy. Like, it's not making $500,000 a year or $1 million a year. We do have a few. We have some surgeons, some dentists, and some business owners, but most of the folks we work with make a good income. And one thing that we try to remind people, it's not how much money you make, it's what you do with it that matters. I have one particular family that we work with, and two-parent home, but they had 4 kids. They homeschooled their kids. So it was a single income home. While they were raising their kids, I don't think he ever made more than $60,000 a year. And he, of course, American dollars, $60,000 a year, which is not poverty, but it's certainly not extravagant. And he retired in his 50s as a multimillionaire. And it's about intentionality. It's about making what you have work for you. If we used a fitness metaphor to that, it's not about having the access to the best treadmills, the best training equipment, the best gym. It's about using it consistently. It's about you having the right actions. Now, if you have incredible genetics and you have access to a great gym and great equipment, can you get in better shape faster? Absolutely. But if you have a little garage gym and you don't have great genetics, can you still be in good shape? Absolutely. It's going to take a little bit more. It might be a little bit more work, but you can absolutely get there. And I just want to remind people that their behavior is the biggest determining factor in their success. So here in America, one of the largest class of millionaires are teachers. They
Wow.
don't make a ton of money. They don't have super high paying jobs. They don't even have great benefits. But for whatever reason, and maybe it goes back to some of this delayed gratification. Every single day they're in a classroom with kids trying to teach kids delayed gratification. Yeah, you got to do your homework. You got to work on this test. I don't know all the reasons, Reino. I'm not pretending I know, but I just know that here in America, teachers are one of the biggest working class millionaire groups. And it just goes to show, I think, that with the right focus, anybody can build a life of financial freedom and security. And it isn't picking the right investment. It isn't getting lucky. It's the people that are successful in finance, just as they are in business and in fitness and in relationships. The people that are successful in investing and in finance, they do consistently what most people only do occasionally. So they're not even doing different things, but it's like, there's people that go to the gym once a month, whether they need to or not, right? And it's like people that, okay, I'll put aside money into my retirement account or into my mutual funds when I have money left over, when it's convenient. That doesn't get you anywhere. It's the people that wake up every morning saying, I'm committing to my personal health, I'm committing to my relationships, I'm committing to my financial health, regardless of what I feel like. I'm just going to execute. So the people that execute, those are the people that find success.
So is that the discipline of this teacher, putting away a set amount of money in, say, a mutual fund every single month, that compounding in interest over the years? Is that the strategy?
Yes. And what's one of the kind of the secrets there is in a lot of those retirement systems, it's automatic. So I think that's one of the reasons teachers find some success is because a lot of times they have an obligatory savings program. So if you work in like corporate America, you have a 401k, you often get to choose how much money you put in there. A lot of people choose zero, but a lot of teacher retirement systems, it forces them to put in a certain percentage. Now they can add more or they can open up other accounts, but it happens automatically. And it's not a decision that they have to make. It comes out every single paycheck. So when we can automate good decisions, that's a huge step forward. And it's like somebody packing their gym bag or cooking all their meals the day before. It's not automated in a sense, but it's taking the decisions out of it. If I bring my food, which I did, if I switch my camera around, you can see my lunch bag. I've got my broccoli and my cauliflower and my celery and all that stuff in there. I don't have to make a decision. McDonald's is right next door. I'm not trying to fight and wrestle with this idea. Do I go get McDonald's or do I eat my vegetables? I've already made that decision. I made it last night. I packed my lunch. It's in a bag. And it kind of automates that decision. And people can do that with their investments as well, having it coming out of a paycheck, having it coming maybe first of the month directly out of their bank account, going to those investments. So they don't have to wrestle with that decision every single paycheck or every week or every month. It's a decision they make once and then they automate it.
Would you recommend people seeking financial advice from a financial advisor like you are one? What investments would you recommend, let's say, to a teacher starting out in his job? Okay.
Well, obviously, I'm very biased, right? I believe in the importance of coaching and encouragement. I talked about a marathon in a physical sense, but in a mental sense, in a lifestyle sense, building wealth is a marathon. This isn't about getting rich quick. It's about building wealth slowly. It is tiresome. It's fatiguing. You're making difficult decisions. You're delaying gratification over and over and over again. And you see your neighbors driving a nicer car or going on a vacation, and it's hard. And I think having people in your corner, whether it's professional financial planner like myself, or just like-minded friends and family that are going to encourage you and remind you, yeah, you're making sacrifices, but there's going to be a payoff. It's really important to stay motivated. And you mentioned, delayed gratification. I think we also need to celebrate wins. We need to celebrate small victories, reward ourselves for that delayed gratification, because this doesn't happen overnight. And I don't know when it happens, but at some point in our lives, adults feel like they're above the little rewards, the little treats. And I was on another show the other day, was talking about potty training. I've got a 3-year-old, right? It's our youngest. We have 6 kids. The youngest is 3. And he's potty trained. Every now and then we get a little surprise. But every so often, I'll just give him a little treat just to reinforce the good behavior that he has. And but when he started, every time he went to the bathroom where he was supposed to, we gave him a little treat every single time, because we wanted to celebrate. We wanted to reward that behavior. And the wiring in a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old that needs those reinforcements doesn't change when we're 33 or 63. So I think celebrating those small wins, every 2 weeks or every month, that money goes into retirement. Celebrate that, reward yourself somehow, even if it's something really small. But we want to, this is a marathon, so we want to set up those milestones along the way to remind us that we're on the right track. So that's where having a professional, or if not a professional, a group of like-minded people can be really helpful to help you stay on the right path. And to your question about, the right investment, for a teacher, really for anybody, it's going to come down to the long-term goals. So what we want to do is look at our investment choices through the lens of what we're trying to build long-term. And a lot of investors out there aren't really strategically investing towards a desired outcome, or at least a specific objective. They're just kind of collecting investments. And what we try to do is get people to pick a long-term objective. Now, that long-term objective, those goals can change, but we want them building towards something measurable and specific, surrounded around what they think is meaningful, what they want their life to look like. And then we choose the right investments based on what they're trying to build long-term. So, Reino, just like if you were trying to build a house, your building strategy and the tools and materials that you use would be based off what that house is designed to look like. We don't want to just collect investments like we would collect building material, and then we try to figure out what we're building with it. We want to design the house first, then create a blueprint, then select the tools. Now, like I said, the goals can change. Just like if you were building a house, what that house looks like will evolve through the process. That's okay, but you want to always be following a blueprint. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is there isn't one perfect right investment. It should be based on your goals. Now, if I can take a step back from that and kind of 30,000 foot view, most of our people that we work with, we encourage them to be owners of companies, not lending to them. What I mean by that is a lot of mutual funds out there have a mix of stocks and bonds. So with a stock, you own a company. You own hundreds, maybe even thousands of companies. With bonds, you are lending to companies or maybe governments. And a lot of people, as they get closer to retirement, shift more into bonds, which is kind of funny because they shift into fixed income. And we already talked about retiring in a rising cost world, people living longer. Retiring on a fixed income in a rising cost world is very dangerous, but bonds are more stable. And we have come to believe that stable is the same as safe, and it's not. Stability is not safety. It might be comfortable, but as you and I have already discussed a little bit, comfort is often the antithesis of long-term security. We have to choose discomfort in the moment. So lending to companies is for many people is not going to be the driver that gets you to where you want to be. You want to be an owner of companies. When I say that, I'm not talking about an individual company, but through mutual funds, you can own slivers and slices of hundreds or thousands of companies. And what it does is it gives people the ability to own literal brick and mortar companies, but because they own very small pieces of a lot, they're never going to have enough money in any one company to make a killing, but they're also going to never have enough money in any one company to get killed by it. And that's this idea of diversification, where they don't have to worry so much about what any one company does because they own so many. They're just continually buying more and more of those companies. They're just planting more trees in their orchard. They're not so worried about what any one branch or tree produces because they have thousands. And they're also not worried about how much that orchard is worth in any given day. What they're worried about is how much fruit it can produce over a lifetime. Does that help answer that question?
Yeah. That makes sense, especially if you look at that diversity aspect. So much more sense than financing a credit card company with credits. So at some point in your life, you obviously want to retire, enjoy life, and have enough money to finance that lifestyle, which is different, as you say, for every person.
Yes.
And I think that's what it boils down to, isn't it?
It does. And I guess I'm glad that you said that, because one of the things I would like to just throw out there is maybe challenging even the idea of retirement, because a lot of people view retirement as something of a finish line. And I think that is detrimental on a few different levels. Number one, if we view retirement as a finish line, the tendency is to ignore or maybe not appreciate the journey to it. We tell ourselves, I can experience happiness when I cross the finish line. I'll have more time with my family when I cross the finish line. I'll be able to take care of my health when I cross the finish line. And we push all these things out to the future. And the problem is, a lot of people, they get to that point and they've forgotten how to enjoy life. They've sacrificed so much to get to that finish line, but by the time they cross it, yes, they're wealthy from a monetary standpoint, but they sacrifice relationships, they sacrifice health. They've forgotten what it feels like to live in a fulfilling, meaningful way. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is, well, when you're running a race, when you cross the finish line, you slow down. And what we try to get people to think about is this idea of a work optional lifestyle, where you're not necessarily retired. Maybe you are, but you no longer need your paycheck. You no longer need to go to your job every day to sustain your lifestyle. So you can choose to do what is most meaningful for you. It's about meaningful pursuit. Now, that might mean you retire from your job. It might mean you start your own business. It might mean you pursue something else. Maybe it's a ministry or a nonprofit. But the idea is your investments over here are covering all your bills. They're paying for everything. You don't need an income from a job to do that. So you now have the freedom and independence to chase after what is most important to you. And that's what's really frustrating for, I think, a lot of folks. I'll just pick on Americans, but you talk about consumerism. A lot of people don't know what's meaningful to them. They know what they think is meaningful to other people. And we end up spending money we don't have to buy things that we don't need with money we can't afford to impress people we don't even like. And it's just kind of crazy. So what we try to do is help people really understand what does meaningful pursuit look like? What does a life of abundance look like to them? And when they are able to get there, it's not a finish line. It's a whole new chapter in their life. It's a whole new beginning. Because I think the most impactful years of somebody's life is after they reach that point of financial independence, because they no longer have the constraints of going to a job every day.
Yeah, such an important message of finding meaning and purpose in the here and now and building on that. And just to touch on your point again on retirement, I had a lovely chat the other day with someone who said exactly your point. Life doesn't often stops when people go into retirement. And that's when they have their crisis of meaning and purpose. They start neglecting their bodies, their nutrition, and then it's only a short few years until they die.
Well, you mentioned, I can't remember which show it was, but one of your guests talked about loneliness. Loneliness is a huge issue for retirees, especially the ones who are quote unquote successful and wealthy, because from the outside looking in, they're going on the cool vacations, they're playing golf every day, they're cool, but they don't necessarily have that meaningful pursuit. And of course, this is a broad generality, but for a lot of us, there's a certain amount of meaning, connection, even identity wrapped up in our jobs and our careers. When we unplug from that, we often need to plug into something else. It doesn't have to be the same thing, but we can't unplug from that culture, from those friends, those coworkers, and again, that identity, and just leave that cord unplugged. It has to be plugged into something else, because loneliness is a huge issue, at least here in America, for a lot of retirees. And again, I'm talking about people who are pretty financially successful. They have the money, but not necessarily the meaning and fulfillment. And I also think you're right. Health starts to fail. Like when you don't have meaning and purpose, loneliness sets in, depression sets in, health fails. But even if your life span isn't shortened, your quality of life can diminish. So somebody might live 20 years past retirement, but to your point, a lot of times that isn't necessarily living. It's sometimes very sadly slowly dying.
Yeah.
So they're not living for 20 years, they're just slowly dying for 20 years after they retire. So when I started my practice, I thought my job was going to be making sure people don't run out of money in retirement. And what I've learned is it has to be bigger than that. It has to be helping people make sure they don't run out of purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of my clients in Europe obviously are seeking skilled employees. There's a huge lack in skilled employees, and some of them are bringing back the retirees, not for a 40-hour week, obviously, but for 10, 12 hours a day, and it serves both sides.
Yes.
People aren't overworking, and they still have a meaning and purpose. They feel valued because they act as sort of mentors for the younger ones.
Yes. We see that a lot of our folks, after they quote unquote retire, they go back and maybe do some consulting and things like that, because they have this skill set, they have experience. And I don't know where it's interesting to hear you say that, because obviously, there's similarities, but there's differences in different countries, different cultures. But I think this whole idea of retirement is still fairly new. Like a couple hundred years ago, you didn't get to retire, and you always had meaning and you always had to contribute. Even if you were 85 years old, you still had to contribute to your village, your tribe. And we've gotten to this point where you don't necessarily have to, from a cultural standpoint. As long as you're able to cover your own expenses and needs, people will kind of just leave you alone if that's what you want. But from a psychological perspective, I do believe that we are wired to be needed and to contribute. And there's underlying messages in a lot of different cultures and countries that beyond a certain point, your contribution is over. You're no longer needed by society. And I think that is so destructive, and I cannot stand it. I love like guys like John Maxwell, who's an author. He's written like over a dozen books after 80 years old, and or after 75, I can't remember, but there's so much wisdom and experience that younger people can glean, and it goes to both sides, right? Younger people need to be more active in seeking that out, and I wish that folks from the older generation would be more vulnerable with exposing that information and that experience, and both parties would learn to connect, because that's how it happened. My family, my mom was on a farm in South Dakota, in the farming community. You learn from the older generation, you pass it down to the younger generation. There was a handing off. And I think in a lot of modern society, that the continuance of skills and information has kind of broken down. And it's a crisis here in America. We don't have that younger generation with that skill. You alluded to that, especially in the trades. I don't know what it's like in Spain or in Europe, but the trades are severely lacking because those skill sets have not been developed in the younger generation.
Yeah, it's the same here. I agree totally.
Okay.
And something definitely has to change in our mindset. And I'm convinced that those companies that have a diverse number of employees from different nationalities, from different age groups, from the genders, are the most successful, are the most creative.
Well, and that's a part of the message we're trying to put out there. In fact, I'm writing a book on this. You asked the question, can anybody do this? Can anybody build financial independence? And I think if we had a healthier message out there, that it doesn't matter if you're a plumber, a pipe fitter, a welder, a teacher, a law enforcement officer, you don't have to have a Harvard degree or own your own business or connections at Oxford. Like, you can be just a normal man or woman with a decent paying job and still produce this. I think if we could encourage people be more likely to go into those trades, realizing that they can still achieve that same financial independence, maybe even more than somebody with a very expensive education or with a certain family or financial pedigree. Those things aren't necessary to be successful financially or to live an abundant life.
I had this discussion just the other day where we compared the earnings of a doctor working in a hospital and an electrician with 2 or 3 employees earning way more. And the doctor, of course, still has to pay off his study fees.
Well, and not only that, but you think about the run up to that. If you're a doctor or an attorney, or and not to disparage any of those career fields either, but you're taking all that time to get there. Whereas, you can go in an apprentice program with a plumber or electrician, and in a couple of years be making really good money. And a lot of these jobs, I don't see them getting replaced anytime soon. Some of these jobs, they might not be super, illustrious, but my goodness, if your toilet is clogged in the middle of the night, there's nobody in the world that's more important than that plumber getting out there and getting that fixed, or getting your hot water going again, or somebody replacing your garage door when the springs crack in the middle of the night and your garage door can't open, you can't leave your garage. I mean, like, all these things, the electrician making sure that your generator is hooked up so you have power during. I wish people could see the impact they could have in these quote unquote normal jobs, where you're not just a carpenter. You're building somebody a home. You're not just a plumber. You're giving somebody peace of mind. You're not just a teacher. You're investing in the next generation and helping somebody's knowledge and creativity come alive. Like, I wish people would look at their jobs as something bigger, and looking at the impact they can have, not just from a financial standpoint, but impacting the people around them. Because I think we would live a little bit differently if we had that perspective.
Yes, such an important message, and we've touched on so many really good and important issues. How can people connect with you?
Well, the best way to get a hold of us, our website is veritasalaska.com. And we have folks all over the United States and a few folks internationally. But we were founded in Alaska, so Veritas Alaska. If people have questions or comments, they can get a hold of us at ask@veritasalaska.com. They should shoot us an email. Again, it's ask@veritasalaska.com. And if folks are interested in learning more about planning their financial future, getting more in depth about how to set up an investment strategy, how to think with the right mindsets, they can even send an email to ask@veritasalaska.com. Just put book in the subject line. And Reino, what we'll do for your audience, anybody who sends us an email, we'll put them on a list to get the pre-release of our Kindle version, and we'll give them a discounted rate for that. I think we could pretty much give it away for like $1. So we're happy to do that for your audience.
Okay, and we'll put it in the show notes below.
Perfect.
Yeah, I really want to acknowledge you for the message you're putting out there, especially for those folks doing ordinary jobs, and so how to find meaning and purpose, and how to create more financial viability in their life. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's been my pleasure, Reino. Thank you so much for having me.